Hello again, friends, and welcome to episode 17. It's been a long time between episodes. I did episode 16, I think, back around Christmas time. And I haven't been back for a while because, frankly, I needed to take some time on my own spiritual journey and my own spiritual path to kind of test where I was at. I needed to do some more reading and some more thinking, and to some extent, a lot less thinking. I've spoken with a number of teachers about a number of different teachings. And I wanted to kind of test where I was because, in order to share these ideas, one has to be pretty sure about them. And at times, I wasn't quite sure. And so now I'm a little bit more sure than I was. And throughout all this time, I have to say that I have felt essentially peaceful and happy the overwhelming majority of the time. Uh, and it's not that I don't experience frustrations, irritations, problems, things that we all experience in our day-to-day lives. It's not possible to not have those experiences. But there's an anchor to it for me, where I really have come more and more to feel intuitively, not just intellectually, but in my gut, that I'm just part of the whole unity of the universe, which is God. We can call it God, we can call it consciousness, we can call it awareness, we can call it source. There are lots of different names for this. But essentially, there is this pure being, this isness, that always exists and is not bound by any of the things that we see as limiting ourselves and our world. In this pure being, this ultimate reality, there is no time, there's only eternity. And eternity doesn't mean time that goes on forever. Eternity means the absence of time. There's no time, there's no space, there's no distance, there's no birth, there's no death. There are no objects, there are no things, there are no borders. Pure being is infinite. Even the word infinite doesn't do it justice. We can't really describe it, it just is. And that isness is that in which everything else appears. I asked somebody recently if you could define the self as essentially a spiritual being or a part of spirit that expresses itself in a physical form that we call a body, and engaged in an associated mental activity that we call a mind. And he said, yes, I can accept that definition, but it's really a halfway point, because it's still giving credence to the notion of separate objects and separate things, a body, a mind, a spirit. We cannot help thinking of ourselves as individual bodies and minds that are living in a world outside of us, consisting of other people and other objects and other things. And some of us think that that's all there is, and some of us believe that there's a God, but the God is somewhere distant out there, somewhere separate and apart from us that we can't even really know or approach, and all we can do is pray to it. And ultimately, I think that there is no separate God or separate world or truly separate individuals. We manifest that way. Source or God or consciousness manifests everything, including our individualized experiences. But ultimately, we're just all manifestations or modulations of that infinite, pure, one single being that just is. Science is beginning to bear this out. I'm not a scientist, and I don't really understand quantum physics. I couldn't really explain it to you, but I think much of what quantum physics is saying is that when you start looking at stuff, things, and you try to figure out what it's made of, ultimately you get down to nothing. There is no thing, object, that is the source of every other thing. The notion that things are made of other things and that you can reduce it down to one bottom line thing that's called matter, since they can't really identify it, and they talk about waves and light and tiny little particles that nobody has ever seen that are only mathematical constructs. Ultimately, it seems that the universe is made out of nothing. Not nothing, but no thing. So ultimately, the true reality is spirit. The true reality is formless awareness. That is where peace resides. And that is ultimately what we are made out of. We're made out of peace. We don't experience it because we get so associated with our belief in our existence as a separate finite self that is born, lives, eventually gets sick and dies. We lose our connection to our source. And I've been trying to figure out how to reside there. And I think ultimately you can't really figure it out. Being a very left brain person, I want to figure everything out, understand it intellectually. And that's one of the reasons why it's taken me so long to come back and do another one of these videos, because ultimately what I've learned and what I'm starting to accept is that can't figure it out, can't explain it. There are no words. There is no intellectual reasoning that the finite mind can come up with that can explain it. We just know it in our gut, in our heart, in our soul. We just know that ultimately reality is God, and that everything else is just part of that. See you next time.